I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, but he caught a fish. He was about wee big. And he looked so tiny in the water because the reflection of the water, that to make the fish look bigger. I wonder if he'll bring it in so my son Peyton could whip up a meal.
Or he can mount it or something.
Yeah, that's right. It could be the talking fish on the wall. So on Friday, in case you all missed it, because, they always try to hide news on Friday, President Biden came out and said those people will pay. Those people will pay. Those people being Border Patrol agents who he still thinks use their horse reins to whip Haitian immigrants.
But it was horrible what to see, as you saw. To see people treated like they did, horses barely running them over, people being strapped, it's outrageous. I promise you those people will pay. They will be, there's an investigation underway now, and there will be consequences. There will be consequences. It's an embarrassment, but it's beyond an embarrassment. It's dangerous. It's wrong. It sends the wrong message around the world. It sends the wrong message at home. It's simply not who we are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, Border Patrol agents now say he started a war. One saying, is the president really threatening to throw us in prison? The 4 Border Patrol agents have been put on desk duty. They're taking horses out of Del Rio, Texas, which that terrain calls for horses.
Yeah, you can't drive vehicles out there.
And even the photographer who took that picture that went viral said some of the Haitian men started running, trying to go around the horses. I've never seen them whipped by anyone. He was swinging it, but that's to direct the horse in a different direction. That picture that I took was misconstrued. He told KTSM there in El Paso, Texas, about that picture. And then Jen Psaki, asked, is he really going to, really go through with this to make sure, to publicly name these 4 Border Patrol agents and call them out and maybe charge them with something?
I think what you heard from the president is a very human and visceral response to those images, which I think reflects how a lot of people in the country felt when they saw them. There is an investigation the Department of Homeland Security is overseeing. That will determine what the personnel decisions may be, any other policy decisions, and that needs to see itself through. But I think the president wanted to make clear to people who watched those photos, who had understandably emotional responses, that that's not acceptable to him. Even while the investigation is happening and moving forward, that will determine what the consequences will look like.
And then I don't know if you saw, but over the weekend, miraculously, 15,000 people just disappeared. Here's a Homeland Security Director Mayorkas, who's on with Chris Wallace.
How many have been released into the U.S.? They're released on conditions, yes. and approximately, I think it's about 10,000 or so, 12,000.
10, 12.
10, something like
maybe.
that.
We know that about 2,000 Haitians were returned home, and the rest were released into the United States of America. So I don't know what he's talking about, but to get more information and real numbers, let's welcome back to the program our Monday Day Hit with Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano. Good morning, Mr. Carafano. How are you?
Hey, look, I think these guys are just addicted to lying and excuses like OxyContin. I mean, they started and now they just can't stop. And so we started with a lie talking about the whipping. And by the way, when the president stated that story had already been debunked.
Right.
So he was repeating a lie that had already been debunked. So it went from a lie, and then Psaki just made excuses for the lie. So here's the part of the story that I don't think is really getting enough attention. So there are about 15,000, about 12,000 came in, like 80%. So again, they lied because they said, well, we're returning these people. And then he said, well, they're on condition. So if they're ordered removed, then of course they won't leave, because the number of people who actually go through a process and then voluntarily show up for deportation is, just slightly to the north of zero. So they're just more illegal immigrants in the United States. So they lied about that. But here's what's significant about this. This is a playbook. This isn't about 12,000 people getting in the United States. This is a playbook for the next 10, 50, 100,000, the tens of millions that will come. And it's just, this is what you do. You go to the border, you set up a big camp. These guys will rush in, they'll let you in, and boom, you're done. And so this will be a strategy that will be adopted by others. Every time there's a camp, the press will show up. There'll be big photographs. The White House will rush in to get those people out of there, and they'll just, boom, take another 10, 15,000 in the United States. Before this process is done, at the rate we were going, and I don't think this is exaggeration, we will get tens of millions of illegal immigrants coming in the United States every year.
That's some pretty scary stuff. Well, why, where did those, because all of a sudden it was bad optics. Yes, it was, they created a shanty town underneath that bridge. And then all of a sudden they disappeared because Reverend Al Sharpton was there on Friday and they were going to have a big BLM protest on Saturday. So do you think that that's the reason why they got out and then they had the front loaders out there lifting all that garbage that they left behind and putting
it off the news cycle? Look, this is the administration's MO: lying, excuses, and just get out of the news cycle. So the perfect analogy for this is, remember when the news about China being potentially responsible for the COVID coming a leak out of the lab, it got a crescendo. What did Biden do? He jumped up and he said, I'm going to demand a 90-day review of the intelligence on this, which was kind of bogus on its face because we already knew what the intelligence community knew. Why did we need 90 days to do this? And the answer is simple. They just wanted to get on the news cycle. So like 3 months later, the report came out. It said, oh, well, we can't tell you anything we didn't tell you 3 months ago. And Biden because we were in the middle of the next Biden disaster, we just moved on. So the whole thing here was just get it out of the news cycle. So there's a little memo. I'm sure. I don't know. Where they took away the button where Trump could order Diet Coke or whatever. Right. I'm sure they put a little note there for Biden to step 1, lie. Step 2, make an excuse. Step 3, get it out of the news cycle. And that seems, I don't know if there's a note there or not, but that just seems to be the playbook for everything they do.
But it just doesn't sit well with a lot of Americans that he's defending the illegals before defending and figuring out what the Border Patrol agents actually did. He's not protecting his own.
Yeah, this goes back to how this administration doesn't act like a normal presidential administration. Every other politician, when things go south, what they normally do is they change what they're doing because they want to get reelected. These guys just double down on awful. And I mean, it's getting to the point. I mean, it's so bad that despite having a thoroughly compliant press, all these pundits, these congressional, everybody going out and saying how wonderful this administration is, that Americans are still just blink. I mean, and it gets worse every day. So there was reporting over the weekend about how Kamala Harris is quietly building support, as if, okay, well, maybe Biden's not going to make it, but that's okay because we've got Harris in the wings. This is the most detested woman in Washington, has no friends whatsoever, and has demonstrated zero leadership ability. And this would be like on the captain of the Titanic, when the ship is going down, and their answer is, there's a sinking lifeboat over there. Let's jump on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple observations. There has always been this historic ebb and flow of refugees into the United States. In fact, if you look at, I think it was as early as 2016, 2017, there were 85,000 refugees that just flooded into this country. So, and I think Congress, they're looking to increase the authorization to something like 120,000 or something like that. Clearly the administration has no policy. And when you have no border policy, whether it's you lack a policy or there's this perception that you lack a policy, you're going to have this natural flood of people who are going to want to get into this country. Mm-hmm. For all the right.
But there's so many mixed reports, too. That ABC exactly. is saying 8,000 Haitians went back to Mexico.
Yeah, but let me just make a comment. Let me just finish my comment. So what happens is, in the absence of a policy or the perception that you have no policy, so you can have this natural flood. The problem with the administration is whenever they're caught in an error, they double down or they try to change the narrative. So clearly what they did in the case of the Haitians after Maxine Waters attacked them and Al Sharpton threatened to show up was they wanted to double down on the issue. They wanted to make the issue go away. That's why suddenly what happened? Because if you remember early on, what they were doing was they were putting them in planes and they were flying them to Haiti. Incidentally, even Haitians who hadn't been in Haiti for 4 or 5 years,
because they went to South America or Mexico.
Right. That's right, yeah. But some of them hadn't been to Haiti in 4 or 5 years. They were still flying them to Haiti. So not only didn't they have a border policy in how to deal with the with the infusion of refugees at the border, but they didn't have a border policy on how to get them back to where they came from. So at the end of the day, the administration, I mean, it's just incompetency. It's like Afghanistan all over again. It's like Afghanistan on the border, the lack of policy, the lack of strategy, the lack of follow through, and then always doubling down when they're caught in the lie, when they're caught in the mistake. And this has just been the modus operandi of the Biden administration so far.
But just to clarify, so people understand, because the word refugee is kind of used fast and loose, and this administration exploits that, and indeed they lie about that. And you actually made a really important point there. The way international norms work is, if you're a refugee and leaving your country, you seek refugee status in the first safe harbor. Mm-hmm. In other words, the first country that you get to where you're not at risk, you're a refugee. There's no international norm that says you get to refugee shop after that.
That's right.
Like, I don't like the country I'm in, I'll just go to another one. So almost all of these Haitians left years ago, and they've been in other countries where they were refugees. When they come to the United States, they're not really refugees. They're just illegal immigrants. Now, they might claim asylum status, but that's different than being a refugee. So they're not refugees. And when we talk about, and we're all sympathetic to refugees, that's why when we say that, everybody goes, oh, yeah, but they're refugees. But they're not. They're just more illegal immigrants coming into the United States. And you're right. The administration is incompetent. I'm right. They lie. They make excuses. And then they just move out of the news cycle. But we're all right in a key thing, which is when they are criticized by the left, they will jump through hoops to figure out how to get out of it. So if the left's upset about the story of the horsing, and they're going to find a way to get out of that, because the one thing they won't do is go against the hard left of their party. So there is it's like a black hole with this infinite gravitational field that is sucking the president's party into it. And they will do very little to get out of that. So you're right. This is a good example. When the left jumped at the border and complained, then that problem had to disappear because that couldn't be tolerated.
Well, let me make
just like when you go ahead.
No, I was going to make Sorry, go ahead.
When AOC did this thing with the Iron Dome stuff, they voted it down and all that. But in the old days, somebody like that would have been, taken out to the back and drummed out of the party.
Right.
Now they treat her like a goddess.
And she's crying fake tears, and the whole thing was
when I was talking about refugees, I wasn't trying to give like a legitimacy to individuals who try to get into the country illegally. I was just talking about the statistics. If you Google and you look at the stats, there have been ebbs and flows. But let me tell you how it was handled during, if I have a minute, how it was handled during the earthquake in Haiti back in 2010. The administration came in, they laid out a policy for bringing a large number of immigrants, of refugees from Haiti into the country, because obviously because of the devastation. It was structured, it was orderly. I myself sponsored a number of families because obviously I worked in Haiti. Well, today those individuals are all thriving.
Oh, they are? You check up on them?
Did you know that the Haitian diaspora remit? These are Haitians in the United States, in other countries, which incidentally the numbers like almost tripled after the earthquake in Haiti. They remit $3.5 billion back to that island. They send $3.5 billion back to their families in that island. This is an island of 11 million people.
Oh, I've been there. Yeah.
Before the earthquake, it was $1.5 million. So it was $1.5 billion. The point that I'm trying to make is, there's a way to have a policy, a border policy, to have a system for dealing with refugees, to have a process by which people are brought in, to which people are settled. And obviously, it's like it's like a circus in terms of the administration's inability to manage anything.
Well, I mean, their policy is open borders. I mean, they may be inept about how they try to get there. And this is the problem, which is, on the one hand, they try this facade of, Mayorkas has said the border is closed. I mean, he said that. I mean,
but they're still coming. There's tens of thousands that are already on their way. And they're just going to set up in a different town. If it's not Del Rio, it'll be another town.
If the border was not opened, they wouldn't be coming, period. And whether it's if it's closed, obviously people aren't getting the message because they are coming because it's not closed.
Now, real quick before we let you go here, the mainstream media has long moved on from Afghanistan, but our Americans are
forgotten.
Yeah, it's forgotten. Anybody still there that needs to be rescued? Do we know?
Yeah, we know. I get emails all the time from people trying to help people get out of Afghanistan. If you want to give me $15,000, I can get you a family of 3 out. So I don't know the exact numbers. I don't know if anybody knows the exact numbers. I think in part the problem there is a lot of people don't want to contact the U.S. government because they're afraid if they do, they just identify themselves and they might put themselves more at risk. So yeah, there are still people scrambling to get out. A number of them are Americans, green card holders, but also other groups as well. It's definitely an ongoing story. Most of it's happening now through kind of underground railroads, a lot of it going to Tajikistan. But it's incredibly, and of course the Taliban every day are getting more violent and more aggressive and going back to their old ways.
All right. Well, we have to leave it there for today. But Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for making time for us every morning, Monday morning. We appreciate it.
It's because you guys are the best.
All right. Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Did you know that Big Lou can vaccinate your entire estate from the virus known as Uncle Sam? That's right. Big Lou and Term Provider have the only single-dose solution in town, a $1 million term life insurance policy. Yep, a $1 million term life insurance policy with no side effects. One call to Big Lou can lead to an entire estate vaccination that'll provide 100% guaranteed protection against estate taxes and debt, even if you are a bit porky or have a splash of sugar diabetes. In fact,